Welcome to Channel AMEC, your insight to the Australian visa system. Good day everyone, my name is Carl Young, your online YouTube visa consultant. Are you interested about migrating to Australia? Why don't you consider to subscribe to my channel and turn on a little bell on the side so once we have all the updates and news, you'll be the first one of getting all the insight. Now, being sick of waiting, but there's really nothing can be done apart from being patient and wait for the newly elected government who has actually started their first parliamentary sitting this week. Obviously, I think a lot more policies will be more clear and provided in view of the coming future for everyone. That's including you, have that interest about migrating to Australia. So today's topic is all about the skill migration. So it's the most sought topic and the most numbers of people who quota require for migration point of view. So what I'm going to do today in this video is I'm going to provide some of the predictions based on the information received over my past experience. And I'm going to take example from the Canberra Matrix and also what we have learned from last week of the Tasmania's new criteria. Now, what do they actually tell us in the future, and perhaps some of other states and territory may have some sort of copy policy as well. So I'm going to take you firstly to the Honourables, the Treasurer, the Honourable Dr. Jim Chalmers media release. This was back on July 11. Now the reason why, so people will ask, well, Carl, what is this about? This is about the Jobs and Summit for Australia, yes. And what is this gonna do in regards to the immigration and policy and the visas? Well, it's gonna be very important because the current issue of Australia and worldwide is the skill shortage. Now, interestingly, before pandemic, everybody got jobs, and there was no shortage back then. Why is it over 2 years of period with all the lockdowns and the contraction of the COVID-19 and things like that, and now in 2022 everywhere around the world is experiencing skill shortage? Now, the quick answer to this, no, obviously I'm not an economist, but I can provide. I've read some research and articles. It's all about the elderly people. Had a lot of elderly people for these past 24 months had passed away, obviously due to the contraction of the virus, and a lot of people had been allocated for working at home remotely, right? So people have more choices now. So rather than going into a factory or some sort of a traditional job and employment, they may not choose to do so. And that leaving a lot of vacancies in primary production predominantly, and those high-ended professional work. I don't think there's too much of a skill shortage there, but a lot is actually in the primary production. But then that slowly, one by one, adding together and causing all these skill shortage worldwide. So obviously Australia is not immune from that. I've got some friends who work in regional Australia in the agricultural sector. Well, they basically tell me that they still cannot find anyone. They still rely on overseas skilled workers. So this Jobs and Skills Summit will actually be very important. It's going to be held in September 1st and 2nd of September in Canberra. What does it do? Personally, I think it's a set away event that invited hundreds of stakeholders. Stakeholder means industry leaders and all these commerce and chamber of commerce people from different sectors come along to Canberra and have a little chat for 2 days. And I probably will know the result. The result is, yes, there is in fact a skill shortage nationwide in Australia, and the recommendation shall be this. This is my prediction, and I think that's the government is moving towards that way anyway, is obviously we got skill shortage and the unemployment is very low because all Australians already got jobs. And how do we get more people to work in more jobs? Obviously, not the Australian, not the local Australian, because they already got jobs. So how do we get more people to get jobs? Well, that's pretty easy answer. You get more people from overseas, and that's all the skilled migrants overseas. So that would be the answer for you. And now, if that is the way that the current government, the Albanese government, the Labour government is moving towards, obviously then we can see some potential prediction on criteria for other states and territories by looking ahead of what we have already learned from Canberra Matrix and the Tasmania's criteria. Now, there probably will be more other fancy stuff. I do not know, because no one actually getting to those insights, but we can always predict. I probably won't be 100% matching exactly, but I think the way is they're looking for people to get into jobs and looking for skilled migrants coming from overseas and also getting into the jobs too. Now let's have a look at the Canberra Matrix, and what I wanted to share with you is this part. Now, from last week's Tasmania's criteria announcements, we've learned traditionally. Now let's talk about traditional. So that's the old ways. The criteria for skilled migrants, traditionally, they wanted the skilled migrant to target it and employ it at the occupation that they are in, right? Well, that's pretty easy answer. If you're an accountant, you work as an accountant. If you're an IT technician, you work as an IT technician. If you're a chef, you work as a chef. But in the coming future, we have already seen that trend, and I think that is actually coming up. Now, what the Canberra Matrix did, I think back in 2021, or perhaps they did it in 2020, but it's over during pandemic. So what they did was, I'm gonna skip all this age and proficiency and things like that, but let's look at this. One thing that they did was they giving out priority for people staying longer in the particular state and territory. Now we see that trend has been copied and duplicated in South Australia, right? They want those people who has been in South Australia long enough, they giving you a priority. Now, obviously we see that in Tasmania's criteria, the new criteria. I'm gonna the next page I'm gonna show you later on is the same thing as well. And I'm sorry, this is the employment, but the length of staying, here we go, length of current ACT residence. So they're counting at 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So the more you have shown evidence that you have stayed in that state or territory, they're giving you that priority at all points, or whatever they're trying to give into you. Now the second thing is this one. I'm going to show you the length of employment. Now length of employment, that actually obviously for the EOI skill select that you get more points, but see this part, the employment does not have to be permanent and continuous, and you work for more than one ACT employment, and you can be subcontracted with your self-employed ABN, and you may be working in any occupations. Now this is very important part. Now well, personally, I did not pay too much attention when those clauses came out, well, years ago, because that's not the major items that a skilled migrant should look for. You just working in any kind of jobs. For example, if you are an accountant and you came out of accountant, then during the time you probably cannot find a true accounting jobs, but you work as a clerk, a bookkeeper, that can also be counted as well, but provided also you need to get your skill assessment done. So skill assessment is you graduate with accountant, you get a professional year done, you get that full skill assessment. Okay, but you can actually work in other kind of title rather than previous or a traditional criteria or policy. They require you, remember this clause, closely related occupations. Now, probably that won't be the case anymore for the new upcoming policies. Now, I'm going to point you to the Tasmania's a new skill migration pathway. Now, you may want to go back to my video last week to actually have a look at the detail on that one. But today, I'm going to show you where it's actually taking us with the new trend. So if you look at this one with the upcoming, because currently it's only Tasmania, they disclose their criteria. I'm not too sure why they do that. It's good, but all the other state and territories stay calm and stay just no voice. They don't tell anyone until it's out. But Tasmania has decided to disclose this with 2022 and 23's criteria, and you can see this with the skill employment pathway that they said this. If you have a skill assessment related employment in occupation list in Tasmania occupation skill occupation list, you may be eligible to nominate after 3 months, so that's fine. So you only need a skill assessment, okay? And after 3 months of your employment, now that 3 months is pretty easy. You must currently be living in Tasmania, intend to currently living in Tasmania. Your employment does not, now read this one. Your employment does not need to be related to your skill assessment. Now, isn't that the same as what they try to say in here? You may be working in any occupation. Interestingly, now the reason I want to point this out is we don't see that in the past. We don't see that in the past. Now, you see there's a wave of encouragement of skilled migrants coming into Australia. Now, you don't need to go in squeeze into those closely related occupation of your nominated occupation anymore. As long as you find a job and you get into the economy, helped Australia to pump the economy, they are giving you the obviously an opportunity to migrate there. So here is the trend. Now, if ACT already done that, ACT is the first state and territory did that, and obviously South Australia came out and then added into the residency test, so they gave a priority for people who has resided in the state for longer enough to actually giving a priority. Now, the Tasmania came out with a new criteria inserting this, that your employment does not require to be within, can be in any, doesn't have to be in your occupation of your skill assessment. So that, I think that makes more sense, because currently we know in the past in Tasmania, you graduate as IT, you graduate as a architect, you graduate as whatever it is, it's actually very hard to find a job that or employment is exactly or closely related to your nominated occupation. But this is welcoming. But let's see how New South Wales, Victoria, Western Australia, Northern Territory and Queensland criteria. The reason I wanted to predict this, I think it's gonna be a wave, a trend, encouraging skilled migrants to just get into the workforce, whichever the job that is, doesn't really matter. As long as you work in the employment, you've been paid. As long as you can pay, there's tax being paid to the government. Government makes tax, and then that will have a positive cycle, turn around the economy. So I think that will be the actual trend. Now, the reason I'm doing this video with this prediction is starting from, I forgot how many years ago, Tasmania coined out the idea of a small business owner, and also then a year later, Queensland copied the idea, and then a year later, South Australia copied the idea as well. So, well, people may ask, why does it always start from Tasmania? Well, probably don't know. Tasmania is the smallest economy state of Australia, probably get some sort of priority of getting all these information first, so they can actually design the criteria to actually be more preferable in compared to all the other state and territory, probably. And that's probably why Tasmania disclosed their new 2022-23 criteria before anyone else as well. Anyway, this is my prediction. It's a welcoming message. all the way as we predict to see the Australian government to open up the door for more migrants and more quota, especially. Anyway, should you have more questions, query, more than welcome to leave a comment right down below, and I see you next video. Goodbye.